Alright, so the tarp I use is actually the Yama Mountain Gear Cirriform tarp, which is considered a shaped tarp as compared to more of a flat tarp like Joe's is. You'll notice that the Cirriform has two beaks, one on either side, that kind of close in the ends of the tarp. And it's also it has more of a catenary cut than Joe's does, which has a little bit of it. But so the way I start with setting up my tarp is usually hiking into camp, have my trekking poles already extended out the way I like to hike with them. I set my poles at 115 centimeters. It's really quick to set it up for the tarp because all I have to do is leave the head end at 115, and that goes at the head, and then the back end of the tarp is actually whatever my pole is completely collapsed. So I usually go and stick my the head end of my tarp, that trekking pole in the ground, and then I stick my foot end in. And what's also a little more unique about this tarp is it actually allows for you to set your tarp up with the handle end up, not the tip end up like in Joe's tarp. And that allows me to actually stick them in the ground when the ground is soft enough, and I can just have them spaced out exactly where I need them right off the bat, which is actually really handy. Taking the tarp out of the stuff sack here, usually put the stuff sack in my pocket or something so I don't lose it. Unravel the tarp and kind of orient it so the head end is towards me. And this is the head end of the tarp. You can tell that by the zipper on one end, and it's significantly larger than the tail end of the tarp here. If you reach inside of the beak here, inside of the peak, there's actually a little pocket, and that pocket is where your handle of your trekking pole fits in. So it goes right into that sleeve, and then flip it right side in, and now your trekking pole handle is right in the peak of the tarp. And because you can stick the trekking poles in the ground, you can kind of let it sit there. Sometimes it falls over, sometimes it doesn't. But most of the time, I can just do it like this. Then you grab 3 shepherd hook titanium stakes. And what I like to do is stake out the guideline first. So this tarp has a line on it goes to the peak, a line that comes off of the actual beak of the tarp, and then 2 side ones. So there's actually 4 guidelines on either end. The ridge line and the beak line actually go to the same, you can put those on the same stake. So I usually do the ridge line first, and kind of space that out make sure it's kind of straight with the back trekking pole, and kind of stake that in a few feet out from the trekking pole. and kind of make that semi-tarp, or semi-taut. And then I go to the side ones. So you can kind of find your side guideline. And I try to stake this one out kind of in line, maybe a little bit behind the trekking pole itself, and space it out enough so I'll be able to actually tighten this whole entire front beak. So there, I'm going to be a little too tight, so we kind of make this taut so you have a 90-degree angle between your trekking pole and the ground. And then come over to this side, pull it tight, and in line with that front, or the other side stake, 4 to 6 inches ahead of the trekking pole. And then you tighten that. And what I found is if you make this beak tight and then move on to the back end, we'll actually take this other guideline out here and stick it in the same one at the very end and tighten the whole thing up. And we'll see that once we get this finished. Then we can move on to the back. Same process with the back, and inside the peak here, there's a pocket. And that pocket goes over the handle of the trekking pole. And then stake out your ridge line. Get a few more trekking poles, a few more stakes. Stake out your ridge line. You can make your ridge line taut. And for the most part, these trekking poles stay in those little pockets, but sometimes they move around until you get it all kind of staked out. Now we can stake out our rear side tie-outs, kind of the same way we did the front, just in line or a little bit behind that trekking pole. Making sure you give enough room for this trekking pole to stay vertical, and then move on to the other side. Tighten that, make sure this is kind of taut. Tighten that ridge line, and now you can kind of see which ones you need to move. Sometimes you get lucky and you get all 4 of the corners in the right spaces, and sometimes you got to move them around a little bit to kind of get these sides to be taut. So I'm going to move these back a little bit just to kind of get that side taut. Maybe move this one back a little bit. Now that all those are kind of in place, you can start to take this beak tie out and put it in that same exact stake as the ridge line and tighten that up. And you can see once you tighten that up, it kind of brings everything in. This might be a little too tight, but we'll go up to the front and see how that looks. We'll bring this beak tie out, and this is one of the last steps I do because you can get the whole thing pretty taut, and then bringing this beak in just kind of tightens everything up and usually makes for a pretty good pitch. So that's about the process that I do. It's pretty easy to get everything right because the trekking poles, they're the exact same height that I hike with, and then collapse all the way down. The spacing you can pretty much get dead on too, just by feeling out. You kind of get a feeling of how far they need to be apart. Sometimes I need to pitch it down lower, even more, and I usually shorten this trekking pole down. Just in stormy conditions or any reason why I would need to drop the whole thing, just drop that trekking pole down, and then you can kind of start with your ridge line and tighten all of your guidelines up. And now you have a lower pitch. The rear, I find that I can lower the front beak down and keep the back one at the same height most of the time, but sometimes I want the whole thing down even further. And for that, because my trekking pole is shortened all the way, I just have to put it in there kind of at an angle, and I can get the tarp all the way down. Because this tarp is made out of Cuban fiber, I don't have to worry about the material expanding or shrinking at all. So I actually find that if I pitch this taut, just like I did here, I don't get any sag or anything during the middle of the night. It stays taut. It doesn't shrink. The material doesn't move around or expand or anything, which is a really good aspect of Cuban fiber. And one of the reasons why I think Cuban fiber is best when you use it in a shelter or a tarp. Anything else?
Nope.